All right, today we're jumping right into the Faroese economy. We're going to look at the latest headlines and then get into some really key analysis from the Economic Council. Welcome to a bit about Faroese news. So let's get straight into what's shaping the economy right now. So, first up, we're going to cover the hard numbers. We're talking economic growth and trade. After that, we'll dig into what the Economic Council has to say. And they've got opinions on public spending, fiscal policy, and yeah, the big one, the housing shortage. All right, first things first. Where's the economy actually headed? Let's take a look at the growth forecasts for the next few years. For 2024, the projection is for a pretty solid 3.3% growth. But then, things are expected to slow down a bit in 2025, dropping to 2.0%. And then, get this, it's projected to bounce back in a huge way. We're talking 6.1% growth in 2026. That's a big jump. So you might be asking, what's the deal with that dip in 2025? Well, it really comes down to one key thing: lower salmon prices. And that drop is big enough to pull down the entire GDP growth forecast. Even though, and this is interesting, other parts of the economy are still going strong. Things like wage payments are actually showing really high activity. And you know, that whole salmon price situation, it's the perfect lead-in to the bigger picture of exports and trade. It's a story all about fish, of course, but also some pretty surprising new tariffs. It's really like a tale of two different fisheries here. On one hand, you've got cod and mackerel. The quotas are lower, sure, but the prices are just soaring, which makes up for it. And then you have farmed salmon, and it's the complete opposite. Production is way up, but the prices are falling. Okay, and this is where things get really interesting. There's a new player in the game: U.S. tariffs. Now, the Faroe Islands just got hit with a new 10% tariff on their seafood exports to the U.S. And look, a new tariff is never what you want to hear, right? But here's the twist. Their main competitors, think Norway, Iceland, the EU, they're facing an even higher 15% tariff. So weirdly enough, this actually gives the Faroe Islands a bit of a competitive edge in a really important market. All right, so that's the news part of our briefing. Now, let's switch gears. We're going to dive into the Economic Council's analysis of what's going on, and we'll start with their take on public spending and the deficit. Before we jump into the numbers, there's this key term the Council uses that we've got to understand. It's "hakonjunktur," and all it really means is an economic boom. You know, a time with high employment, lots of economic activity, and the whole system is kind of running at full tilt. And the important thing to know is, the Faroe Islands, they're smack in the middle of one right now. And this is exactly where the Council starts to raise a pretty big red flag. Because even though the economy is in this boom, this hakonjunktur, both the central government and the local municipalities are projected to run pretty big deficits in 2025. We're talking a total of about 2% of the entire GDP. And let me tell you, running a deficit when times are good, that is definitely not what you'd find in the economics textbooks. And that leads us right to the heart of the Council's critique of the current fiscal policy, which is basically this: why are we spending so much right in the middle of a boom? Yeah, the Economic Council, they really don't pull any punches on this one. They state it bluntly, quote, "Politicians are afraid to make unpopular decisions." I mean, it's pretty clear they're suggesting that the tough spending cuts that need to be made just aren't happening, and it's for political reasons. The Council's argument here is actually pretty straightforward. Here's how it breaks down. The problem is, all this public spending during a boom is just overheating the economy. The effect? Well, that overheating drives up prices for everyone, especially in construction, which hurts businesses, taxpayers, and families. So what's the solution? Fiscal policy is supposed to be counter-cyclical. That means you save money during the good times to cool things down and prepare for the bad times. You don't pour gasoline on an already roaring fire. And the Council gets really specific about what to do. They're not talking about simple across-the-board cuts, you know, the lawnmower approach. Nope. They're pushing for much tougher structural reforms. Things like getting rid of duplicate services in government departments and even hospitals. The kind of changes that create real sustainable savings in the long run. And finally, all of this economic pressure, the high activity, the public spending, it all leads to the Council's last big point of analysis: the housing shortage. And when you look at the causes of the shortage, it's like a perfect storm. You've got labor shortages in construction, building costs are through the roof, and there's just not enough available land to build on. And then, to top it all off, you've got all these public projects competing for the very same workers and materials as private home builders. It's a real squeeze. So the council's message to policymakers is pretty direct. This is a supply problem, and it needs direct action to fix it. The only way out of this, they say, is to actively work to increase the supply of both land for development and new houses. It's a really stark warning, you know? It shows that in a booming economy, maybe the biggest challenge isn't just managing the money, but actually making the hard choices that are needed to make sure that growth is sustainable for everybody. Like and subscribe to PAL's Fundamentals for more content like this. Sources linked below.